Think of it as liberation. The text message burned my eyes as I stood in my black dress beside my father's casket, surrounded by flowers and the quiet sobs of family members. Just an hour after we'd lowered Dad into the ground, Marcus Brennan, my boss's son, had chosen this moment to fire me. I showed the message to my husband David, who was helping carry the flower arrangements to our car. His face went from confusion to rage in seconds. But before he could say anything, I held up my hand. "Not here. Not today," I whispered, my voice steady despite the storm building inside me. How could Marcus be so cruel? I had just buried the man who taught me everything about integrity, hard work, and standing up for what's right. The man who worked 3 jobs to put me through veterinary school. And now, as mourners were still hugging me and sharing their condolences, I was receiving termination via text message. But as I looked at my father's grave one last time, something clicked. Dad always said that people show you their true character in moments when they think it doesn't matter. Marcus had just shown me exactly who he was. He had no idea what he'd just unleashed. Before I continue with this story, if you're finding it compelling, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Many viewers watch these stories but never engage, which means the algorithm might skip you for future uploads. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this ends. Now, back to the worst day that became the turning point of my life. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and until that text message, I was the head veterinarian at Brennan Animal Medical Center, the most prestigious veterinary practice in our state. At 34, I had built a reputation as someone who could handle the most complex cases, from emergency surgeries on exotic animals to developing treatment protocols that other clinics across the country now used. My father, Miguel Rodriguez, was a maintenance supervisor who immigrated from Colombia with nothing but a fierce work ethic and an unshakable belief that education was the path to a better life. When I was 8, he started working nights at a warehouse while keeping his day job, saving every penny for my college fund. "Mija," he used to tell me while helping with homework after his 16-hour workdays, "you have a gift with animals. But gifts mean nothing without knowledge and character to back them up." I earned my veterinary degree with highest honors, completed a specialized residency in emergency and critical care, and published research on innovative surgical techniques for small animals. That research caught the attention of Dr. Robert Brennan, who founded Brennan Animal Medical Center 30 years ago. Dr. Brennan hired me 5 years ago, and I quickly became indispensable. I designed new protocols that reduced post-surgical complications by 40%. I trained the entire staff on emergency procedures. I built relationships with animal rescue organizations that brought in steady business while helping the community. Under my leadership, the critical care department became the most profitable division of the practice. Dr. Brennan called me the best investment this practice ever made and began grooming me to eventually take over operations when he retired. Then came Marcus. Marcus Brennan was 29 years old with a business degree from an expensive private college and 0 experience in veterinary medicine. He'd spent the previous 5 years bouncing between failed startup ventures, each one funded by his father's guilt and hope that his son would eventually find his calling. 8 months ago, Dr. Brennan announced he was bringing Marcus in as practice administrator, a newly created position that essentially made him my supervisor despite his complete lack of medical knowledge. The problems started immediately. Where Dr. Brennan trusted my medical judgment completely, Marcus questioned every decision. Where Dr. Brennan understood that emergency veterinary care sometimes meant expensive procedures for clients who couldn't immediately pay, Marcus instituted rigid payment policies that turned away animals in crisis. Most disturbingly, Marcus began pushing for cost-saving measures that compromised patient care. Cheaper anesthetics, generic medications with questionable efficacy, pressure to discharge animals earlier than medically advisable. When I pushed back, citing medical ethics and patient safety, Marcus would smile condescendingly and say, "Elena, I understand you're passionate about the animals, but this is a business, not a charity." 3 months ago, things escalated when I refused to use a substandard surgical equipment supplier that Marcus had chosen because they offered him a kickback. He couldn't fire me, his father would never allow it, but He began systematically undermining my authority. He excluded me from staff meetings. He contradicted my treatment recommendations in front of clients. He spread rumors that I was difficult to work with and resistant to necessary changes. The final straw came 2 weeks before my father's death, when Marcus tried to force me to euthanize a dog that could have been saved with surgery the owners couldn't afford. When I arranged for a rescue organization to cover the costs instead, Marcus exploded. "You're making this practice look bad by suggesting we don't care about money," he screamed in his office. "Maybe you need to decide if you want to be a veterinarian or a social worker." That's when I made my decision. I quietly began documenting everything, every unethical demand, every corners-cutting directive, every instance where Marcus prioritized profit over patient welfare. I also started copying financial records that showed the kickbacks and suspicious vendor relationships. I was building a case, but I needed time to do it properly. Time I thought I had. Then Dad got sick. It started with Dad complaining about being tired all the time. Mom insisted he see a doctor, and the tests revealed stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him 3 to 6 months. I took Family Medical Leave Act time to help care for him, which infuriated Marcus. This is exactly the kind of thing that happens when you get too emotionally attached to employees, I overheard him telling his father. She's putting her personal problems ahead of the practice. Dr. Brennan, to his credit, told Marcus to back off and assured me that my job would be waiting whenever I was ready to return. For 6 weeks, I split my time between the hospital, Dad's house, and brief check-ins at the practice to handle emergencies that only I could manage. Marcus made snide comments about my part-time commitment, but I ignored him. My father was dying, and nothing else mattered. Dad fought hard, but the cancer was aggressive. In his final days, when the pain medication made him drift in and out of consciousness, he would grab my hand during his lucid moments. "Elena, promise me something," he said 3 days before he died. "Don't let anyone make you smaller than you are. Don't let anyone convince you to compromise your values for their comfort. You have strength you haven't even discovered yet." He died on a Tuesday morning while I was holding his hand. The funeral was scheduled for Friday. I texted Dr. Brennan to let him know I'd need a few more days before returning to work. His response was immediate and kind. "Take all the time you need. We'll manage here. Your father would be proud of the woman you've become." Marcus's response came 20 minutes later. "We need to discuss your employment status when you're ready to prioritize work again." I should have seen what was coming. The funeral service was beautiful. Our church was packed with Dad's co-workers, neighbors, former students from the citizenship classes he taught on weekends, and families whose pets I'd treated over the years. Person after person spoke about Miguel Rodriguez's kindness, his work ethic, and his unwavering integrity. Dr. Brennan attended, sitting respectfully in the back with several staff members from the practice. I was touched by their presence during such a personal moment. Marcus was notably absent. After the service, we drove to the cemetery for the burial. As they lowered Dad's casket into the ground, I felt the weight of finality settling over me. This man who had sacrificed everything for my future was gone, and I was now responsible for honoring the values he'd instilled in me. The graveside service ended around 2 p.m. Family and friends began drifting back to their cars, heading to my childhood home for the traditional post-funeral gathering. David was helping load flower arrangements into our SUV when my phone buzzed. The message was from Marcus. "Effective immediately, your employment with Brennan Animal Medical Center is terminated. Your personal items will be boxed and available for pickup Monday. Think of it as liberation." I stared at the screen, certain I was misreading it. He had fired me, by text, at my father's funeral, and had the audacity to frame it as doing me a favor. David saw my face and immediately came over. "What's wrong?" I handed him the phone without a word. I watched his expression change from concern to disbelief to pure rage. "I'm calling him right now," David said, pulling out his own phone.
"No."
My voice was surprisingly calm. "Not here. Not today." "Elena, this is insane. He can't do this." "Actually, he can. Dad always said that people reveal their true character when they think no one's watching. Marcus just showed me exactly who he is. I looked around at the cemetery, at the friends and family still saying their goodbyes to Dad, at the headstone that would forever mark where the best man I'd ever known was laid to rest. He has no idea what he just did to himself, I said quietly. David studied my face. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that Dad spent his whole life fighting for what was right, even when it was hard, even when it cost him. And he raised me to do the same. I slipped my phone back into my purse. Marcus wants to play games?
Fine.
But he's about to learn that some games have consequences he never saw coming. We went through the motions of the post-funeral gathering. I accepted condolences, shared memories of Dad, and made sure everyone had enough food. But underneath the grief and social obligations, my mind was working. Marcus had made a critical error. He'd fired me while I was on protected FMLA leave, which was illegal. He'd done it via text with no proper documentation or cause. And he'd chosen to do it at my father's funeral, which spoke to a level of cruelty that would shock anyone who heard about it. But more importantly, he'd freed me from any ethical obligation to protect the practice that had been my professional home for 5 years. That evening, after the last guest had left my mother's house, I sat at Dad's old desk in his study and opened my laptop. David brought me coffee and sat quietly while I worked. "What are you doing?" he asked after an hour of watching me type. "Building a case," I replied without looking up. "Marcus thinks he fired a grieving daughter who'll just quietly go away. He has no idea he just liberated someone with 5 years' worth of documentation about his unethical practices, illegal kickbacks, and medical malpractice incidents he's covered up." David leaned over to see the screen. I was compiling a comprehensive report with dates, times, financial records, and photographic evidence of every violation I'd witnessed. "How long have you been gathering all this?" 3 months actively, but I've been taking notes on Marcus's behavior since he arrived. Dad always taught me that if something seems wrong, you document it. You never know when the truth might be the only weapon you have. I worked until 3 a.m. that first night, organizing everything into categories: financial fraud, medical malpractice, animal welfare violations, employment law violations, and tax irregularities. By dawn, I had a 47-page report with supporting documentation. But I wasn't ready to use it yet. This required strategic thinking, not emotional reaction. Monday morning brought the first call from Dr. Brennan. I let it go to voicemail. "Elena, please call me as soon as you get this. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Marcus had no authority to terminate you, especially while you're on bereavement leave. Please call me immediately." The second call came an hour later. "Elena, I'm trying to reach you. I've spoken with Marcus, and there's clearly been a miscommunication. Your job is secure. Please call me back so we can sort this out." By noon, there were 6 voicemails from Dr. Brennan, each more desperate than the last. The final one, left at 2:47 p.m., was different in tone. "Elena, I don't know if you're ignoring my calls intentionally, but I need you to understand how serious this situation has become. We've had 3 emergency cases today that required your expertise. Dr. Martinez is good, but she's not trained for the complex surgeries you handle. A German Shepherd came in with a ruptured spleen, and, Elena, we lost him. We might have saved him if you'd been here. Please call me back." That message hit me hard. I knew the German Shepherd, a 2-year-old named Zeus whose family had brought him in for routine checkups since he was a puppy. Dr. Martinez was competent for standard procedures, but she'd never been trained on the advanced trauma techniques I developed. David found me crying in our kitchen, the phone still in my hand. "What happened?" I told him about Zeus. About how a dog died because Marcus's ego had removed the one person capable of saving him. "You have to go back," David said immediately.
No.
I wiped my eyes and stood up straighter. I can't save every animal by enabling Marcus's behavior. This is exactly why I documented everything, because his recklessness was always going to hurt someone. Now it has. I called Dr. Brennan back that evening. "Elena, thank God. I've been trying to reach you all day." "I got your messages, Dr. Brennan. All of them." "Then you know how badly we need you here." Marcus made a mistake dash. Marcus fired me at my father's funeral. I interrupted. Via text message. After I'd been nothing but loyal to this practice for 5 years. That wasn't a mistake. That was a character revelation. The silence stretched between us. Finally, Dr. Brennan spoke, his voice heavy with regret. You're right. What Marcus did was unconscionable. I've already spoken with him about his behavior. Elena, please come back. Name your salary. I'll give you full authority over medical decisions. Marcus will stay out of clinical operations entirely. I appreciate the offer, Dr. Brennan, but I can't work for someone who thinks my grief was an appropriate time to play power games with my livelihood. Then what can I do? How do I fix this? I took a deep breath. You can't. Some things, once broken, can't be repaired. They can only be replaced. What does that mean? It means I'm starting my own practice. And Dr. Brennan? When I do, you're going to understand exactly what Marcus cost you. I hung up before he could respond. Over the next week, calls from Dr. Brennan became daily occurrences. The practice was in crisis. Without me, they couldn't handle complex surgeries, emergency procedures, or the specialized treatments that had made them the premier veterinary facility in the region. More animals died. A cat with a blocked urinary tract that I could have saved in 20 minutes. A parrot with lead poisoning that required chelation therapy Dr. Martinez had never performed. Each loss was reported in the local news, as these were often beloved pets of prominent families. Meanwhile, I was building something bigger than a case for wrongful termination. I was building a nuclear weapon. The financial records I'd copied revealed that Marcus had been skimming money from the practice accounts for months. The kickback arrangements I'd documented weren't just unethical, they were tax fraud. The substandard medical supplies he'd insisted on had led to post-surgical infections that had been covered up to avoid malpractice lawsuits. But the most damning evidence was a series of emails I'd forwarded to my personal account, in which Marcus discussed creative billing practices that constituted insurance fraud. I also discovered something I hadn't expected. Dr. Brennan wasn't just Marcus's father. He was also his unwitting victim. Marcus had been forging his father's signature on contracts, making financial decisions without authorization, and using his father's reputation to cover his own incompetence. Dr. Brennan was a good man whose love for his son had blinded him to the damage Marcus was doing to everything he'd built. By the end of the second week, I had evidence of crimes that could send Marcus to federal prison and destroy the practice entirely. The question was, what did I want to do with that power? The answer came during a conversation with my mother. I was helping her sort through Dad's papers when she found something that stopped me cold. It was a letter Dad had written but never sent, dated just a week before his diagnosis. It was addressed to Dr. Brennan. Dear Robert, I'm writing to thank you for the opportunity you've given Elena at your practice. As her father, I've watched her grow into the veterinarian I always knew she could become, and much of that growth happened under your mentorship. I'm also writing because Elena has shared her concerns about Marcus's management style. I know this puts you in a difficult position as both an employer and a father. But I want you to know that Elena isn't complaining. She's warning you. My daughter has integrity that runs bone deep. When she sees something wrong, she can't ignore it, even when staying quiet would be easier. That's not a character flaw, it's her greatest strength. I trust that you'll find a way to address her concerns before they become problems that damage the practice you've spent your life building. Elena isn't trying to make trouble. She's trying to prevent it. With respect and gratitude, Miguel Rodriguez. I sat on Dad's bed holding the letter, tears streaming down my face. Even facing his own mortality, Dad had been trying to protect both me and Dr. Brennan from what he could see coming. He knew, I whispered to Mom. He knew this was going to happen. Mom sat beside me and took the letter. After reading it, she looked at me with Dad's same steady gaze. Mija, your father always said that the right thing and the easy thing are rarely the same thing. What are you going to do? I knew then that my path forward wasn't about revenge. It was about honoring Dad's memory by standing up for what was right, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. I called Dr. Brennan that afternoon and asked to meet with him privately. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near the practice the next morning. Dr. Brennan looked like he'd aged a decade in 2 weeks. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, his eyes were bloodshot, and his hands shook slightly as he lifted his coffee cup. "Elena, thank you for agreeing to see me. I know I don't deserve Dash." "Dr. Brennan," I interrupted gently, "before we talk about anything else, I need you to see something." I handed him Dad's unsent letter. I watched his face as he read it, saw the exact moment he understood what my father had been trying to tell him. When he finished, he set the letter down with reverent care and looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Your father was a wise man, and I failed both of you." "You failed to see what was happening," I agreed. "But that doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a father who loved his son too much to see clearly." Dr. Brennan nodded, unable to speak. "I'm not here to destroy you, Dr. Brennan. But I am here to make sure this never happens again." "What do you mean?" I pulled out a folder containing copies of all the evidence I'd gathered. "This is what Marcus has been doing to your practice. Financial fraud, insurance scams, kickbacks, medical malpractice cover-ups. He's been forging your signature and making decisions that could send both of you to prison." Dr. Brennan's face went white as he flipped through the documents. With each page, I watched him realize how thoroughly his son had betrayed not just me, but him. "My God," he whispered. "I had no idea. Elena, you have to believe me. I never knew about any of this." "I believe you. That's why I'm here instead of at the FBI field office." His head snapped up. "What do you want?" "I want you to fix this. I want Marcus out of the practice permanently. I want the financial irregularities corrected and reported properly. I want compensation for every family whose pet died because of substandard care. And I want a public apology acknowledging that my termination was wrongful and discriminatory." Dr. Brennan nodded rapidly. "Yes, of course. Anything you want. Just please don't destroy the practice. I have 12 employees who depend on their jobs, and this community needs our services." "I'm not interested in destroying anything, Dr. Brennan. I'm interested in justice. But there's one more thing." "Name it. I want you to sell me the practice." The coffee shop went quiet around us. Dr. Brennan stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. "Sell you the practice? You're 67 years old, and you've been talking about retirement for 2 years. Marcus has proven he can't be trusted with your legacy. I'm offering to buy the practice at fair market value and maintain everything you've built, minus the corruption." "Elena, I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Because the alternative is that I take this evidence to the authorities and let them sort out what happens to your life's work." He was quiet for a long time, staring at the folder of evidence. Finally, he looked up at me with something that might have been relief. "Your father raised an extraordinary woman. He raised me to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard." Dr. Brennan agreed to my terms that same day. Within a week, Marcus was officially terminated and banned from the property. Dr. Brennan held a staff meeting where he publicly apologized for the management mistakes that had led to my wrongful termination and announced that I would be purchasing the practice over the next 6 months. The staff reaction was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. 3 veterinarians and 2 technicians had been quietly looking for other jobs because of Marcus's toxic management. 2 others had been planning to quit once they found replacements. "Dr. Rodriguez," said Jenny, our lead veterinary technician, "we never wanted you to leave. We knew what Marcus was doing was wrong, but we didn't know how to fight it." "You don't have to fight it anymore," I told her. "We're going to rebuild this place the right way." The financial cleanup took months. We had to contact insurance companies to report the fraudulent billing practices Marcus had implemented. We set up payment plans to compensate families whose pets had received substandard care. We replaced all the inferior medical supplies and equipment Marcus had purchased through his kickback schemes. It cost nearly $200,000 to make things right, but it was the price of rebuilding trust. More importantly, we restructured everything to prevent future abuse. I implemented transparent financial practices, created an ethics committee that included staff members at all levels, and established protocols that ensured no single person could make unilateral decisions about patient care. While I was rebuilding the practice, Marcus's world was collapsing in spectacular fashion. The state veterinary board launched an investigation into his management practices based on my formal complaint. Even though he wasn't a licensed veterinarian, his decisions had directly impacted animal welfare, making him subject to regulatory oversight. The IRS began auditing the practice's books after I reported the tax fraud. While the practice itself was cleared of wrongdoing once we demonstrated that Marcus had acted without authorization, Marcus personally faced federal charges for tax evasion and fraud. Most devastatingly for someone of his ego, the local newspaper picked up the story. The headline read, "Local Veterinary Practice Cleans House After Management Scandal." The article detailed how Marcus had been terminated for unethical practices and how the new ownership was working to restore public trust. Marcus called me exactly once during this period. I was in surgery when the call came, so it went to voicemail. His message was a masterpiece of deflection and self-pity. "Elena, this is Marcus. I don't know what lies you've been spreading about me, but you're destroying my reputation over a simple misunderstanding. I made one mistake with the timing of your termination, and now you're acting like I'm some kind of criminal. This vendetta of yours needs to stop. I'm willing to forget everything if you just call off this witch hunt and let me move on with my life." I saved the voicemail and forwarded it to my attorney as evidence of Marcus's continued refusal to accept responsibility for his actions. 3 months later, Marcus was formally charged with wire fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to defraud insurance companies. His bail was set at $500,000, which Dr. Brennan paid, with the explicit condition that Marcus never contact anyone associated with the practice again. 6 months after Dad's funeral, I officially became the owner of Brennan Animal Medical Center. I decided to rename it Rodriguez Veterinary Hospital in honor of the man who taught me that integrity was worth more than comfort. The transformation was remarkable. Without Marcus's toxic influence, the staff flourished. We hired 2 new veterinarians and expanded our services to include advanced surgical procedures that no other local practice offered. Most importantly, we restored the trust that Marcus had damaged. Client satisfaction scores improved dramatically. Word spread through the community that Rodriguez Veterinary Hospital was a place where animals came first and families were treated with respect and honesty. Dr. Brennan stayed on as a consulting veterinarian for 6 months to help with the transition. On his last day, he asked to speak with me privately. "Elena, I owe you an apology that goes deeper than words can express." Dr. Brennan dash. "Please let me finish. I failed you as an employer, as a mentor, and as someone who claimed to value integrity. I allowed my love for my son to blind me to the damage he was causing. And when you tried to warn me, I didn't listen." He paused, struggling with emotion. "Your father's letter haunts me. He saw what I refused to see, and he trusted that I would do the right thing. Instead, I enabled Marcus until you were forced to sacrifice your own emotional well-being to save this place." I thought about Dad's words. "Don't let anyone make you smaller than you are. Dr. Brennan, you made mistakes, but you also made them right when it mattered. That takes courage too. I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Maybe not, but you have it anyway. That's what my father would have wanted." Dr. Brennan hugged me then, and I could feel 30 years of built-up regret and gratitude in that embrace. "Your father would be so proud of what you've built here." "I hope so," I whispered back. 1 year after Marcus fired me at Dad's funeral, I received an unexpected visitor. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was reviewing surgery schedules when Jenny knocked on my office door. "Dr. Rodriguez, there's someone here to see you. He says his name is Marcus Brennan." My blood went cold. Marcus was supposed to be awaiting trial and was specifically prohibited from contacting anyone at the practice. Did he say what he wanted? "He just asked if he could speak with you for 5 minutes. He looks different." Different was an understatement. The Marcus Brennan standing in my waiting room bore little resemblance to the arrogant young man who'd made my life miserable for 8 months. He'd lost at least 30 pounds, his expensive clothes had been replaced by a simple button-down shirt and khakis, and his eyes held something I'd never seen there before: genuine humility. "Hello, Elena. You're not supposed to be here, Marcus. Your bail conditions specifically prohibit contact with this practice." "I know. I'm violating my bail by being here. But I needed to say something to you before everything gets decided in court. I gestured for him to sit in the chairs we used for difficult conversations with pet owners. It seemed appropriate. You have 5 minutes. Marcus took a shaky breath. I've spent the last year in therapy trying to understand how I became the kind of person who could fire someone at their father's funeral. Do you know what I discovered? I waited. I discovered that I was jealous of a dead man. I was jealous of your father because he raised a daughter who had everything I wanted but could never earn. Respect, integrity, competence, purpose. And instead of trying to become better, I tried to tear you down to my level. His voice cracked on the last words. The night you were at your father's funeral, I was at a bar celebrating what I thought was my victory over you. I actually celebrated firing you on the worst day of your life.
What kind of person does that?
I don't know, Marcus.
What kind of person does that?
A broken one. A person so insecure and worthless that he mistakes cruelty for power. We sat in silence for a moment. Despite everything he'd done to me, I felt something unexpected. Pity. Elena, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it, and I'm not asking for it. I just needed you to know that I understand now what I did to you. And I understand that your response wasn't revenge. It was justice. He stood to leave, then turned back. One more thing. Your father's death wasn't just tragic for your family. The world lost someone who raised a daughter capable of turning a moment of cruelty into an opportunity for positive change. I destroyed myself trying to hurt you, but you used that destruction to build something better. I watched him walk toward the door, then called out, Marcus. He turned back. What you did to me was unforgivable, but what you've become because of it, that's between you and the person you see in the mirror. He nodded and left without another word. I never saw him again. 2 months later, he pled guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. His lawyer said he had specifically requested no plea bargain and wanted to accept full responsibility for his actions. Dr. Brennan told me later that Marcus had asked him to donate his trust fund to animal rescue organizations rather than pay for expensive legal defense. He said he wanted his money to do some good for once, Dr. Brennan explained. I think your influence changed him more than prison ever will. 2 years after taking over the practice, Rodriguez Veterinary Hospital had become the premier animal medical facility in a 3-state region. We'd expanded to include specialists in oncology, cardiology, and exotic animal medicine. Our emergency services ran 24/7, and we'd never lost an animal due to inadequate equipment or inexperienced staff. More importantly, we'd become a teaching hospital, partnering with the state veterinary school to train the next generation of veterinarians in both medical excellence and ethical practice. I kept Dad's picture on my office wall, along with the unsent letter he'd written to Dr. Brennan. Visitors often asked about it, and I'd tell them about the man who taught me that doing the right thing was more important than doing the easy thing. One evening, as I was finishing my rounds, I found David waiting in my office with takeout from our favorite restaurant. Celebrating anything special? I asked. Just celebrating you, he said, pulling me into a hug. Do you realize what you've accomplished here? I looked around the office, at the awards from veterinary organizations, at the thank you letters from grateful families, at the business magazines featuring articles about our revolutionary approach to veterinary ethics. We've built something Dad would be proud of, I said. Elena, your father isn't proud of what you built. He's proud of who you became when everything was taken away from you. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the text message that had changed everything. Think of it as liberation. Marcus had meant it as a cruel joke, but he'd been more right than he knew. Being fired at Dad's funeral had liberated me from accepting less than I deserved. It had freed me from working within a corrupt system instead of changing it. It had released me from the fear of standing up to people who mistook cruelty for strength. Most importantly, it had liberated me to honor Dad's memory in a way that actually mattered, not just by grieving his loss, but by living his values. But my story wasn't quite finished. 3 months after Marcus's visit, I received a call that would provide the ultimate vindication. It was from Dr. Patricia Williams, the president of the American Veterinary Medical Association. Rodriguez Veterinary Hospital had been selected to receive the association's Ethics in Practice Award, recognizing our leadership in professional integrity and community service. Dr. Rodriguez, this award isn't just about your excellent medical care, Dr. Williams explained. It's about how you transformed a crisis into an opportunity to demonstrate what veterinary medicine can be at its best. The award ceremony was held at the national conference, with over 3,000 veterinarians in attendance. As I walked to the podium to accept the award, I thought about the journey that had brought me there. From a maintenance worker's daughter who'd been fired at her father's funeral to being recognized as a national leader in veterinary ethics, it was the kind of transformation that would have made Dad beam with pride. But the real validation came afterward, during the networking reception. Dr. Brennan approached me with tears in his eyes. "Elena, I need you to know something. I've spent the last 2 years traveling to veterinary conferences, telling the story of what happened at my practice. Not to make excuses, but to warn other practice owners about the dangers of prioritizing family loyalty over professional integrity." He paused, gathering himself. "Your response to Marcus's cruelty has become a textbook case study in how to handle workplace ethics violations. You're literally being taught in veterinary schools as an example of principled leadership." I was speechless. "But more than that," Dr. Brennan continued, "you saved my legacy. Instead of being remembered as the man whose son destroyed everything he'd built, I'm known as the mentor who recognized your potential and did the right thing when it mattered." That night, alone in my hotel room, I called Mom to tell her about the award. "Mija, your father always said that the best revenge is a life well lived. But I think what you've done is something even more powerful than revenge." "What's that, Mom?" "You've turned your pain into purpose. You've made sure that what happened to you can never happen to someone else the same way. That's not revenge. That's transformation." Mom was right. Over the following year, I began receiving calls from veterinarians across the country who were facing similar ethical dilemmas in their practices. Word had spread about how I'd handled the Marcus situation, and colleagues were seeking advice on everything from dealing with corrupt management to building ethical frameworks for their own practices. I started consulting with veterinary practices nationwide, helping them implement the transparency and accountability measures I developed at Rodriguez Veterinary Hospital. What began as a survival strategy had evolved into a movement. The most satisfying call came from Dr. Jennifer Martinez, a veterinarian in Texas who'd been documenting unethical practices at her corporate-owned clinic. "Dr. Rodriguez, I read about your story in the Journal of Veterinary Ethics. I'm in almost the exact same situation you were in, being pressured to cut corners, having my medical decisions overruled by administrators with no medical training, watching animals suffer because of cost-cutting measures. What's stopping you from taking action?" I asked.
Fear.
"I'm a single mother with 2 kids. I can't afford to lose my job, but I can't keep watching animals die because of negligence." "Jennifer, can I tell you something my father taught me? Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite the fear." I spent 2 hours on the phone with her, walking through the documentation process I'd used, explaining how to build a case systematically, and most importantly, helping her understand that she had more power than she realized. 6 months later, Dr. Martinez called me back. She'd successfully reported the clinic's violations to state authorities, and the corporate owners had agreed to implement comprehensive reforms rather than face prosecution. She'd been promoted to medical director with full authority over patient care decisions. "Dr. Rodriguez, I kept thinking about what you said, that we have more power than we realize. You were right. The moment I stopped being afraid of losing my job and started being afraid of what would happen if I didn't act, everything changed." These conversations reminded me of something fundamental. Marcus's cruelty hadn't just changed my life. It had inadvertently created a template for how veterinarians could stand up to corporate greed and administrative incompetence while protecting their own careers. 2.5 years after the funeral, I was attending a veterinary conference in Chicago when I spotted a familiar figure across the hotel lobby. It was Dr. Brennan, looking healthier and more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. He approached with the tentative smile of someone who wasn't sure of his welcome. "Elena, I hope you don't mind the interruption. I saw you from across the room and, well, I had to say hello. Of course I don't mind. How are you, Dr. Brennan? I'm well. Really well, actually. I wanted to thank you again for how you handled everything. Selling you the practice was the best decision I ever made. We found a quiet corner of the lobby to talk. Dr. Brennan looked like a man who'd finally found peace. I need to tell you something, he said. I've started a foundation. A foundation? The Veterinary Ethics Foundation. We provide grants to veterinarians who want to report unethical practices but are afraid of retaliation. We also fund legal defense for whistleblowers and help them find new positions if they face termination. I was stunned. Dr. Brennan, that's incredible. It's funded entirely by the money I made from selling you the practice. It seemed appropriate, using the proceeds from your success to help other veterinarians avoid what you went through. He pulled out his phone and showed me the foundation's website. There were already success stories from veterinarians who'd used the foundation's support to expose everything from puppy mill operations to insurance fraud schemes. There's something else, Dr. Brennan continued. I'd like you to join the board of directors. Your experience and credibility would be invaluable. I agreed immediately. It felt like the perfect way to honor Dad's memory while ensuring that Marcus's cruelty had contributed to something genuinely positive. 3 years to the day after the funeral firing, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter on prison stationery. Dear Dr. Rodriguez, I hope this letter finds you well and successful. I'm writing from federal prison, where I have 18 months left on my sentence. I know I have no right to contact you, and I understand if you choose not to read this. But I needed you to know what's happened to me since our last conversation. Prison has been the education I should have gotten years ago. I've spent my time here working in the prison's veterinary program, caring for the animals that law enforcement agencies bring in as evidence in cruelty cases. Under the supervision of a retired veterinarian, I've learned to see animals the way you always did, as individuals deserving of compassion and expert care. Yesterday, a dog was brought in that reminded me of Zeus, the German shepherd who died because my actions removed you from the practice. I spent 6 hours helping save this dog's life, and when he wagged his tail at the end of the procedure, I finally understood what you've been trying to protect all those years. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness or to make myself feel better. I'm writing because my counselor says that making amends means taking concrete action to prevent the harm I caused from happening to others. I've been working with the prison education program to develop a course on business ethics for inmates who plan to work in healthcare or animal services after release. I've also been corresponding with veterinary schools, sharing my story as a cautionary tale about what happens when ego and greed override professional ethics. I know it doesn't undo the damage I caused, but maybe it can prevent someone else from making the same mistakes. There's one more thing. I've asked my father to donate my inheritance to your foundation work. Not because I think money can buy redemption, but because the money that once funded my destructive behavior should now support the kind of positive change you've created. I don't expect a response to this letter. I just needed you to know that the worst thing I ever did to another person became the catalyst for the best thing that's ever happened in the veterinary profession. With sincere respect and permanent regret, Marcus Brennan. I read the letter 3 times, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Part of me remained angry at the pain Marcus had caused. Part of me felt satisfaction that he'd finally learned the lessons his privilege had allowed him to avoid for so long. But mostly, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope. Hope that people could genuinely change, that cruelty could be transformed into compassion, and that even the worst moments could contribute to something better. I showed the letter to David that evening. "Are you going to respond?" he asked. "I don't know. What do you think?" David considered it carefully. "I think your father would say that acknowledging someone's genuine growth doesn't mean forgetting their past actions. It just means recognizing that humans are capable of change when they truly want to." A week later, I wrote back to Marcus. It was a short letter. "Marcus, I received your letter and wanted to acknowledge your efforts to make amends. The work you're doing to prevent others from repeating your mistakes is the kind of action that creates meaningful change. I cannot and will not forget what you did to me, but I can recognize what you're doing now to ensure it doesn't happen to others. That distinction matters. The veterinary profession needs people who understand the consequences of putting profit over patient welfare. If your experiences can help future veterinary professionals avoid those mistakes, then something positive will have come from something terrible. Continue the work you're doing. The animals and families who benefit from the programs you're developing will never know your name, but they'll benefit from the lessons you've learned. Dr. Elena Rodriguez. I never heard from Marcus again directly, but Dr. Brennan told me that Marcus had indeed donated his inheritance to veterinary ethics programs. The money funded scholarships for veterinary students from low-income families, students like I had been, who understood the value of the opportunities they'd been given. Today, 5 years after that text message at Dad's funeral, Rodriguez Veterinary Hospital is thriving beyond anything I could have imagined. We've expanded to 3 locations, employ 47 people, and have saved thousands of animals who might not have survived elsewhere. But the numbers don't tell the real story. The real story is in the culture we've built, one where every decision is made with the animal's welfare as the primary concern, where staff members are empowered to speak up about concerns, and where integrity isn't just a buzzword on our mission statement. We've also become a model for other practices. The Rodriguez method of veterinary practice management is now taught in business schools as an example of how ethical leadership can be both profitable and sustainable. More importantly, the network of veterinarians I've connected with through consulting and speaking engagements has created an informal but powerful community of professionals committed to elevating standards across the industry. Dr. Martinez in Texas now runs a consulting firm similar to mine. Dr. Williams in Oregon successfully challenged her state's veterinary board when they tried to cover up a colleague's malpractice. Dr. Chun in California exposed a puppy mill operation that had been bribing inspectors for years. Each of these veterinarians faced their own version of what I went through with Marcus. And each of them found the courage to act because they knew they weren't alone. Every year on the anniversary of Dad's death, I visit his grave and tell him about the year that's passed. This year, I had more to share than usual. Dad, I finally understand what you meant when you said I had strength I hadn't discovered yet. You weren't talking about the strength to endure what Marcus did to me. You were talking about the strength to transform it into something that could help others. I told him about the foundation, about the veterinarians who'd found their courage through hearing my story, about the animals whose lives had been saved because their doctors had learned to stand up to unethical pressure. Marcus thought he was liberating me from a job, I said, adjusting the flowers on Dad's headstone. But what he actually liberated was my ability to see beyond my own situation to the bigger picture. He freed me to become not just a better veterinarian, but a better leader. As I was preparing to leave, I noticed someone approaching from across the cemetery. It was Dr. Brennan, carrying his own flowers. I hope you don't mind, he said quietly. I come here every year on this day to pay my respects to your father, and to remember the lesson he tried to teach me in that letter. We stood together in comfortable silence for a moment. Elena, I need you to know something. The Foundation has now helped 63 veterinarians report unethical practices. 63 animals that might have died from negligence are alive because their doctors had the support they needed to do the right thing. Dad would love that, I said, smiling through tears. There's something else. We've had inquiries from human medical professionals who want to create similar foundations for their fields. Your response to Marcus isn't just changing veterinary medicine, it's becoming a model for ethical professional conduct across healthcare. As Dr. Brennan placed his flowers and walked away, I stayed a few more minutes with Dad. You know what's funny, Dad? Marcus was right about one thing. That text message was liberation. Just not the kind he intended. I kissed my fingers and touched his headstone one last time. Thank you for teaching me that the right thing and the easy thing are rarely the same. And thank you for raising me to choose the right thing anyway. As I drove home from the cemetery, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. 5 years ago, I'd been a grieving daughter who'd just lost her job at the worst possible moment. Today, I was a nationally recognized leader in veterinary ethics with a thriving practice and a growing foundation. But the most important transformation wasn't professional, it was personal. I'd learned that true strength isn't about avoiding difficult situations or protecting yourself from cruel people. True strength is about what you do when cruelty finds you anyway. Marcus had tried to break me at my most vulnerable moment. Instead, he'd freed me to become more than I'd ever imagined possible. That evening, David and I were having dinner when my phone rang. It was a young veterinarian from Oregon who'd heard about my story and needed advice about reporting unsafe conditions at her clinic. As I talked her through the process I developed, I caught David smiling at me from across the table.
What?
I asked when I hung up. Just thinking about how that text message at your father's funeral turned you into exactly the person he raised you to be. He was right. Dad had always said that character was revealed in crisis. Marcus's cruelty had been the crisis that revealed not just my character, but my purpose. I thought about all the animals that were alive today because veterinarians had found the courage to stand up to corporate pressure. I thought about all the families who'd received honest, compassionate care because their veterinarians had learned to prioritize ethics over profits. I thought about Marcus, somewhere in prison, finally learning the lessons about compassion and integrity that might help him become a better person when he was released. And I thought about Dad, whose death had coincided with the beginning of everything I'd built since. Marcus had meant to destroy me with that text message. Instead, he'd given me the greatest gift possible, the opportunity to honor my father's memory by living his values on a scale larger than I'd ever dreamed. Think of it as liberation. For once, Marcus Brennan had been absolutely right. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced a moment where someone's cruelty became the catalyst for your greatest growth? I'd love to hear how you transformed your own setbacks into strength. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you won't miss my next story about turning life's most challenging moments into opportunities for positive change.